And I'm Jess.
And welcome back to another episode of Just Gay Stuff.
Woohoo! That is me popping my drink for the evening while we record this wonderful episode for you. Oh, I really spiked on the recording. Oh, calm down, Jess.
Was it the pop?
It might have been. No, calm down, Jess.
You're popping for this episode.
Popping off.
Popping off. Anyways, you guys are used to hearing us be light and fluffy, but this week's episode... Oh my God.
I spilled my drink down my shirt. Oh, fuck.
Sorry, guys. Jess just had a technical difficulty with her mouth.
That's hilarious.
That is hilarious.
Okay, well, we're really setting the tone for the episode right now.
Not really. You guys are used to hearing us be light and fluffy.
This is light and fluffy.
This is light and fluffy. But as we sort of delve deeper into the community after doing all the generalized stuff.
Yeah, we've done the kind of get to know you episodes. And you've seen or heard, you haven't seen us, maybe a little bit.
If you've been on our socials.
Yeah, you've heard us talk about like the light fluffy stuff like Lauren said, but I think we spoke on the weekend.
We did.
About really starting to pierce the surface of some of the issues in the community.
Yeah, we were starting to talk about especially one topic in particular, and that was the pressure of labels. And when we talk about that, we're talking about the pressure of labels in terms of sexuality and sexual orientation within the rainbow community.
Yeah, I want to preface for this episode, we're not talking about gender labels. We are talking about sexual orientation only.
Yeah, the sexual orientation. And like Jess said, we preface that, you know, you guys may or may not align with our opinions. These are just purely our opinions.
Yeah, this is just our thoughts on what's going on in the community, and you don't have to align and you don't have to agree.
We're not trying to force anything on anyone.
Yeah.
In fact, we actually encourage healthy debate, healthy topics, healthy comments on our Spotify.
We want to open up the discussion.
Yeah, it's what we've said the whole time. We're a platform about giving voices back to people in our community. We want to have those open discussions with you guys.
And the only way that we can continue to educate ourselves is by having these openly discussed topics.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, how do we learn from each other? How do we better ourselves? How do we get educated? It's by learning from each other.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think when we sort of went into the nitty gritty of this, we were like talking about labels. We were like, okay, the question that we kept coming up with the most between just ourselves was, is the pressure of labels or putting sexual labels on one another or on ourselves helpful or harmful?
Yeah, that's the big question that we're asking on this episode. And this is our episode topic. The pressure of labels, and are they helpful or are they harmful? Lauren did some research over the weekend. We were in the car. We talked about this immensely.
It was a long chat.
There are currently, and I don't know how many of you know this, but there are currently 47 or more than...
Over 47.
Over 47 different labels for our orientation, our sexual orientation, for who we like. So, yeah, run through...
It's crazy. I'm going to quickly run through... some of the labels now. I'm not going to go in the definitions because that will be here forever.
That will be 2 episodes
That's
worth.
a whole episode. But I certainly didn't know many of these. Many of these overlapped. I wonder how many our listeners would know.
Yeah, so we're going to run through those just now.
All right. So there is allosexual, allosexism, androsexual, asexual, aromantic, autosexual, autoromantic, bicurious, bisexual, biromantic, closeted, coming out. These ones don't really count as sexual orientation. Cupiosexual.
In your opinion.
In my opinion. Yeah, I can't speak for other people, but in my opinion, yeah. Cupiosexual, demisexual, demiromantic, fluid, gay, grey sexual, grey romantic, gynesexual, heterosexual, homosexual, lesbian, LGBTQIA+, libidoist asexual, monosexual, non-libidoist asexual, omnisexual, pansexual, panromantic, polysexual, pomosexual, passing, queer, questioning, romantic attraction, romantic orientation, sapiosexual, sexual attraction, sex averse, sex favorable, sex indifferent, sexual orientation or sexuality, sex repulsed, scoliosexual, spectrosexual, and straight.
So
I need a breather after that.
after listening to those, there's definitely a few that stick out that we've all definitely heard before.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering how many people that are listening now have heard of the more uncommon ones.
I know that there's a lot on that list that I've never heard before.
So without going in and defining all of those, the words sexual and the words romantic stick out the most. So let's just give the difference between those two.
Sure. So sexual attraction is attraction that makes people desire sexual contact or shows sexual interest in another person or persons. Whereas a romantic attraction is attraction that makes people desire romantic contact or interaction with another person or persons.
And so that's different between like sexual attractions and romantic attractions.
Yes. So again, that's why they have terms like different sexuality terms or aromantic terms.
So someone who describes themselves as a romantic term has emotional attraction as opposed to sexual attraction.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. And so then some are self-explanatory, like sex repulsive.
Yeah.
You clearly don't want
Sex.
intimacy.
Well, sexual intimacy, because as we've learned, intimacy comes on different waves and different levels.
Yes, absolutely. And so I'm sitting here wondering how many of our listeners or how many people in the queer community actually define their sexuality by one of these subgroups. Because as you heard, there are a lot and they all come with different definitions and it can be quite confusing, which is why we are doing this episode today.
That is a lot. And that was only the 47. Now take into account that there's actually more than that.
Yeah. So that's a lot to wrap your head around. And as a young person, not me, I'm just saying.
She's old now.
When there are young people trying to figure themselves out, this is where we pose the question when we have this many headings or this many different boxes for our sexuality. Is this helpful or is this harmful?
Yeah.
And the whole reason we're asking this question is because Lauren and I scour Reddit quite a lot because that is the place where a lot of people go to ask questions and we find out what is on so many people's minds.
I think because Reddit is that forum where you're allowed to be yourself, essentially.
It's the black hole of the internet without going onto the
You don't have
the dark web.
backlash. Yeah.
Yeah. But essentially, we've seen so many people on there struggling to find in which subcategory they fit. And that can lead to a lot of confusion that maybe doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, I think between the both of us, we've come across posts asking people's advice on where they are supposed to fit or which sexuality they are. I think the trouble here is that we end up taking on other people's opinions of our sexuality.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like it can be detrimental. And, you know, we've seen people ask, I've liked men my whole life, but now I like a female. Does this mean I'm bi? Does this mean I'm a lesbian? We've seen other people ask, I'm a newly out trans man and I've liked women my whole life, but now I seem to be drawn to non-binary people or other trans people. Where do I fit? What am I supposed to be? The simple answer is you're not supposed to be anything but yourself.
Just you.
In a perfect world, in a perfect society, we would all just accept that we all like different things and we all like different people and it doesn't matter who we love. So have we created all these subcategories to help further define ourselves for our own benefit or for everyone else's?
I think for me personally, I could potentially see it be both ways. So I know for me, coming out later in life, I struggled with just between bisexuality and lesbian. I didn't know of any of these other terms until we started doing research and doing these podcasts. But I was confused just in how I identified.
But in terms of how you identified, was that more important for you or was it more important for the people you were trying to then explain yourself to?
I think it becomes more important for the people that I was trying to explain myself to. I think for me, people had a hard time understanding how I went from only dating men to now only dating women. So I felt stuck between trying to define myself and feeling like I shouldn't have to explain myself.
Yeah, exactly right. And I feel like everyone can sympathize with that thought process. I don't have to define myself, but maybe I should for the sake of fitting in or for the sake of the people that keep asking me.
Unfortunately, and I know I've said I think 1,000 times, but this is because it's my opinion.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the labeling comes down to societal construct and the fact that anywhere we're trying to fit ourselves into different boxes, whether that be a corporate job, whether it be, you know, in sporting society, whether we be the homemaker, whether we be the girl boss.
We're different ranks. We're different,
Yeah.
you know.
So I think it comes down to that. However, I do understand where some people may find that it can be helpful because they want to find a place to belong.
Yeah.
And
so-
unfortunately, we live in a world where we ourselves are not understood or accepted by, you know, possibly the heteronormative people or the heterosexuals or religious beliefs.
Yeah, there are people from all societal groups that are not accepting of the queer community.
Sorry, I think I was getting a bit passionate there. I think the thing is they're the ones trying to fit us into the box, not necessarily us trying to. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I'm going to flip it and ask you what you think.
So personally, I think the same as you. I think that they can be helpful and I think that they can be harmful. I came up with this little thought when I was having this brainwave over the weekend about doing this topic. This is what I think. I think that we have created labels for orientation because society has an inability to believe that attraction happens between two people as opposed to two genders.
Yeah.
And hey, sometimes it's more than two people.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with you in the way that some of these labels can be helpful, especially when we want to feel 100% understood by someone else. If we list all of these things we're feeling and all of these different attractions that we're feeling, and someone can list the exact same thoughts and feelings, we feel less alone. We definitely feel like we belong.
Yeah, we feel understood. We feel like there's a sense of belonging.
On the flip side of that, I feel like these subcategories and having so many different labels for our sexual orientation can be harmful because all we've done is create more divides within our community and more points of difference between us, when essentially all we want to do is feel equal and feel
loved.
Yeah. And my next point, I know not everyone will agree with, and that's fine.
That's okay.
But I think that we as humans are all fluid, and we might not identify that way, but I also think we just never know who we're going to meet and who's going to spark an attraction inside us.
Yeah.
Because there are so many different kinds of people. We're all different and we never know. Yeah, we can have preference to who we're attracted to, but that doesn't mean you can't find that in someone who you never thought you would.
Exactly. And the world's such a big place.
Exactly. I think my argument is just coming from a point of, instead of making all these new categories, we should be just trying to normalize that love is love and it shouldn't matter who we like. We just like that person because they are who they are and we are who we are.
Yeah, it's like what you said about how we should just be able to be like, hey, I like this person regardless of gender, regardless of sexuality, regardless of anything.
Yeah.
And your mates or family just go, great, cool.
Yeah,
like
okay,
it shouldn't
happy
be a
for
massive
you.
thing.
Yeah. So that's where I think I'm coming from, where the labels can be more hurtful, more harmful.
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately we don't need the pressure of labels or the pressure of trying to fit in.
So helpful so to end that question, it's like helpful in the sense of, if you're feeling a certain type of way and you Google, oh, I'm a woman who likes other women and I only like other women, it will say, oh, maybe you're a lesbian.
Yeah.
And you'll go, oh, maybe I am. But when you start to delve into all these other things, like I'm a woman, I sometimes like men, I sometimes like women. I have found lately I'm attracted to non-binary people or transgender people. It might come up as queer, it might come up as pansexual, it might come up as omnisexual.
Yeah.
You're going to start to go, oh my God, who the fuck am I?
Yeah.
And that's where it's harmful, because then it can lead us into imposter syndrome.
And the spiraling.
Yeah.
What is imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome is essentially where you feel like you're not meeting the expectations that others have set for you. And this is so prevalent when we're talking about sexuality.
Yeah.
Because people who are still at the beginning of their journey of self-discovery don't know who they are yet. Or it's the same as people who are coming out later in life. Like when you identified as bisexual and then started to have feelings more for women, were you thinking, oh, I don't feel bisexual anymore, or maybe I'm not bisexual enough, or oh, maybe I'm not lesbian enough because I have been with men?
Yeah, I totally had those thoughts and feelings. I was like, oh my God, maybe I'm not bisexual enough, or I don't fit in that bisexual box anymore because I am leaning more towards women. Or I also went back in my head and went, oh, maybe I'm not lesbian enough because I've had this attraction to men. Maybe I haven't found the right man.
And then did you find any other labels, or were you just like, I am who I am, and I guess I'll be happy when I find the right person for me?
Yeah, I just was like, yeah, I am who I am. I realized that I liked women more, and that was that.
And it should be that simple.
Yeah.
It 100% should be that simple.
Yeah.
We've heard so many times people going through this inner turmoil of, maybe I'm not gay enough, maybe I'm not lesbian enough. What does that even mean?
No idea.
You are you. You are uniquely you, and that is 100% okay.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're trying to instill with the fact that we have all these labels trying to further define us. And I ultimately think that maybe they are further segregating us.
Yeah, I was literally about to say to you, yeah, I think that maybe they do further segregate us. The other topic that I kind of wanted to bring up here is the misidentification of sexual orientation. In this discussion, are labels more helpful or harmful here?
That's a really good question, because only last week did we get pulled up by a friend about saying bisexual instead of pansexual and pansexual instead of bisexual, and that there is a difference between them, but knowing exactly what those differences are, and then omnisexual and other terms that kind of overlap. And obviously we personally are never trying to be disrespectful, but this is where I personally find that having more labels can make you accidentally offend somebody.
Yeah, and that's obviously never our intention. But along with that, I can understand why people do go out on their own and create subcategories in fear of being misrepresented by a specific label.
Yeah, I 100% get that, because at the end of the day, you just want to feel like you. And if you don't fit a giant category, it is easier to explain to somebody, no, I actually identify exactly like this.
Yeah, and I think that's very important for some people to be able to do that.
Yeah, and like we said, at the end of the day, this is 100% just our opinions.
Yeah.
We're not asking you to align with our opinions, just trying to give some food for thought, some both sides of the coin, both sides of the argument. Because another thing that you find is that everyone who falls under the LGBTQIA plus umbrella, we don't all have the same opinions.
No, we don't. And that's totally fine. That's why we've opened up this discussion.
Yeah, and I think it's important to highlight the fact that we should be able to have these open discussions without people getting aggressive online and saying hateful things, when we can just literally talk about it.
So in the spirit of starting this conversation and opening this conversation, we threw it out on our social media. Is the pressure of labels helpful or harmful? And we got some amazing responses.
Yeah, everyone was really keen to weigh in on this, which was awesome, because Lauren and I do feel like it is quite a heavy question and it can be so confusing. So it was really good to hear other people's feedback. And so we're going to read some of the responses, because you might identify with some of these responses. You might agree, you might disagree. Let's keep the discussion going.
Yeah.
So initially, I asked the question, with all of the information that we told you, there's over 47 labels for sexual orientation. Do we think this makes it harder to find out who we are or easier? And so we had a multitude of responses. The first response we had was, this person felt like it makes it harder to figure out who they were. They said, I'm just me and I don't like labels because it makes me a bit more confused about who I am. It's not a clear statement of what exactly I feel. And sometimes within the label, there'll be one or two things that don't actually define me. And so then I go looking for a different label, and then I just continue that cycle. So I can understand that.
I can understand that too. I think it's really hard. I know personally I went down a bit of that rabbit hole too. And I think even recently I've seen people, come up and say, oh, I've just created this label for myself because I feel like I don't fit anywhere.
Yeah. So then we start to create more subheadings just so that we can feel defined in who we are.
Yeah.
And then I guess if that isn't explained properly, other people then start to have that confusion. Another response we got was for a pro label. This one was about bisexuality.
Yeah.
Reading the label of bisexuality was such a relief for me. Coming from a fundamental Christian background, I thought I was a terrible sinner for being attracted to or in love with another female. The label really helped me at the time. I do now prefer pan or queer, but I wish there wasn't a need for labels, but I do understand how they give people a feeling of belonging. All I wanted to know when I was having these feelings was that someone else out there felt the same as me and I wasn't isolated or alone.
And that's a conversation that we've had this whole episode essentially, is that we can understand how it can be both harmful and helpful. Again, everything comes down to that sense of belonging, but we should able to have that sense of belonging without a label.
Yeah. This next response was quite interesting. They used a metaphor for illness. They essentially said that a label was helpful for them in the same way that you would label an illness.
Yeah.
So when you don't know what's wrong with you, you need like a specific label to say, oh, hey, I have this illness. It's called this.
Yeah.
Now I know how to treat it. This person said, essentially in the same way, when people are feeling like they don't fit into the norm, they really look for that label to be able to explain to someone else, well, here, this is who I am.
Yeah, so it's more that explanation for someone else, an outsider, to understand you.
Allowing the label to do the explaining as opposed to you trying to fight within yourself or fight with that other person to say, no, this is who I am. This is what I like.
That's a very interesting analogy.
It was. I did enjoy the fact that they used the metaphor though, because when they first wrote it, I was worried about where it was going, comparing sexuality to illness. I was like, oh no, is this going to be a hater comment? But then when I read it, I was like, oh, I see what you're saying. So that was very interesting. This next person said that they really loved labels because they help them know exactly who they are, exactly where they stand, and exactly what they want.
Oh.
So that's a very good thing for that one person. And this is where I suppose that push and pull comes from. This person in particular says labels make them know exactly where they stand and exactly what they like. Whereas for the other side, you might only identify with a section of the label and then you still don't know where you stand.
You feel that confusion.
And this is why it is important to have the back and forth and have the both sides of the argument, because on one hand, so many people do find it so helpful.
Yeah, it's a solace in a way.
Yeah. And then on the other hand, so many people find it so confusing. So, you know, it's nice to openly discuss.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're all about.
I'll just read a couple more before you finish the episode off. This next person said that they don't like labels because they feel like it makes it a lot harder and it causes confusion for them to define exactly who they are. So they are still floating around in the 47 labels.
In the label space.
They went on to say they don't think that there should be any subcategories, just someone who cares for someone else and loves that person, and everyone else should be happy with that. Which ultimately, that's what we hope society will look like.
We hope one day, and
Eventually.
we try.
And the last comment we got was, labels can be a double-edged sword. They certainly can have negative issues and can make people feel excluded. However, they do hold a power when it comes to organizing and representing for change and progress, which I do understand.
I understand that, and I kind of agree with that. Labels are a double-edged sword, essentially.
Which is what we've said this whole episode.
This whole episode, I feel like we've repeated ourselves quite a bit, but that's where the conversation goes. That's where the topic goes. It's a debate. It's a conversation. There's two sides to every story, two sides to every...
We don't all think the same.
We don't all think the same. We don't all identify the same. Hence the 47 plus labels.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you think? What does everyone listening think? We'll open up the Q&A on this episode because we definitely want to hear from you. Are labels helpful? Are labels harmful? There's no correct answer.
No, there's not. I think it comes down to your own opinion, your own perspective. It's just whatever, however you identify, whatever you decide.
And we just want to hear from you. What do you think? Why are labels helpful for you? Or why are labels harmful for you?
Yeah, let's just keep those conversations going. I know this was a short and sweet episode, but an important one.
Yeah, it was over 20 minutes.
Yeah.
A nice little way to work drive.
Yeah, the work drive, a quick little get in your ears buzzing.
Waking up with just gay stuff.
Yeah.
Well, this week's episode, our outro, is brought to you by Faceless, sometimes also known as Faceless Ukulele, with their song, My Favorite Shade of Lipstick. So we hope you guys have had a fabulous time listening to this episode, and remember to
stay gay, motherfuckers!
If I want my red lipstick, would you wanna hold my hand? If I want my red lipstick, would you agree to come and dance? I'm chemical reactions, I'm a fear of attraction, I'm a walking metabolism, I'll never be thin enough. I wanna be crazy, I wanna be stupid, I wanna make mistakes, cause that's all high school's good for. It's my last year, these the last tears you'll ever read from me. I won't cave to fear of thee. If I want my red lipstick, would you wanna hold my hand? If I want my red lipstick, would you try to understand?
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Just Gay Stuff. Make sure to follow us at Just Gay Stuff Podcast on all your socials and write to us with your stories at justgaystuffpodcast@gmail.com.